The night was cold, so cold that even the air felt like glass breaking with every breath. Inside a narrow alley hidden behind tall walls of stone there stood an iron cage. The cage was covered with frost, its bars frozen solid, and inside it sat a young alien girl. Her skin was pale blue, her long hair stuck to her cheeks, wet from melting frost. She hugged her knees tightly, trying to protect herself from the bitter cold. Her breaths came out as thin white clouds, each one weaker than the last. Her lips trembled. Her hands were tied with chains that seemed too heavy for her thin arms. She whispered something to herself, maybe a prayer, maybe just a wish to survive the night. But nobody stopped to listen. Passers-by looked at her as if she was nothing. Some even laughed softly and shook their heads. She must have done something terrible, they whispered. No one is locked in the cold cage without reason. But none of them cared enough to know the truth. The girl's eyes were heavy, her body weak. She had not eaten for days. She felt her strength leaving her, like sand slipping through fingers. Still, she did not cry loudly. Her tears froze before they could even fall from her eyes. And then someone walked into the alley. A human. He was not dressed like the others. His coat was rough, patched in many places, his boots worn from travel. His face was tired, but his eyes were sharp and full of fire. He had seen too much cruelty in his life, but still he stopped when others walked past. His name was Daniel. Daniel saw the cage. He saw the girl inside, shaking, breathing weakly. He froze for a moment as if he could not believe what he was looking at. Then he stepped closer. "What is this?" he muttered. His voice was low, but anger burned inside it. The girl lifted her head slowly. Her eyes, bright but fading, met his. For a moment she thought he would walk away like the rest, but he did not. He stayed. "Please," she whispered, her voice broken, barely audible. "It's cold." Too cold. Daniel's hands tightened into fists. He grabbed the bars of the cage. The iron was ice against his skin, but he did not pull away. He stared at the lock, at the chains, then at her. "Who did this to you?" he asked. She shook her head weakly. "Doesn't matter. No one will help me. Go, before they see you." But Daniel did not move. His heart beat faster. He looked around the alley. No guards stood close, but he knew they would come if he made a noise. He also knew the cage was not ordinary. The iron was alien forged, heavy and strong. Normal men could not break it, and yet he felt something inside him. A fire he could not ignore. "You're freezing to death in there," he said, his voice steady. "I won't just leave." The girl blinked, her eyes wide with disbelief. You can't break it. You'll only hurt yourself." Daniel smirked, though there was no humor in it. "Then I'll hurt myself trying. Better than standing here and doing nothing." He gripped the chains that bound the door of the cage. His fingers turned red, then white from the cold. His skin stuck to the frozen metal, but he pulled anyway. Veins stood out on his arms, his breath came in harsh gasps. The chains groaned but did not move. From the corner of the alley, two strangers noticed him. They laughed. "Foolish human," one of them said. "That cage has held prisoners for years. Not even 10 men together could break those chains." Daniel ignored them. Sweat mixed with the frost on his forehead. His muscles burned, his bones felt like breaking. But still he pulled. The girl shook her head, panic in her eyes. "Stop, they'll punish you. They'll kill you for this." Daniel looked at her, his teeth clenched, his arms trembling. "Then let them try," he growled. "I won't let you die in this cage." For a moment silence filled the alley, broken only by the sound of chains straining. The onlookers' smiles faded as they realized he was not letting go. Something was different about this human. The girl pressed her hand weakly against the bars. She did not understand why a stranger, an outsider, would risk everything for her. Her world was cruel and kindness was rare, too rare. But here was a man willing to bleed for her freedom. The chains creaked again, louder this time. One of the links bent slightly as if shocked by his will. Daniel roared with effort, his voice echoing against the walls. The guards would hear him soon. The danger was closing in. But in that moment, as the girl stared at him with wide, trembling eyes, something changed. She no longer felt alone. For the first time since she was thrown into the cold cage, she felt hope. The sound of chains straining still echoed in the narrow alley. Daniel's hands were raw, his skin torn open by the frozen metal, but he refused to stop. His breath came out in harsh clouds mixing with the misty night. The alien girl inside the cage stared at him in disbelief. His knuckles bled, red drops falling and freezing on the snow-covered ground. He was not just pulling metal, he was fighting against a system that had locked her away to die. And then the guards arrived. 3 of them, tall alien soldiers with armor that glowed faintly in the cold light. Their eyes shone with cruel amusement. One of them carried a shock staff. Another had a blaster at his side. They stopped a few steps away, looking at the human with a sneer. "What are you doing, human?" the leader asked, his voice deep and mocking. "The cage is not yours. That prisoner is not yours. Step away before you regret it." Daniel's grip tightened on the chain. He turned his head slowly, meeting the guard's eyes. His voice came out rough, low, but clear. "She's freezing to death," he said. "And you're standing there like statues." The guards laughed, their voices echoing in the alley. "Freezing? That's the point," one of them said. "She deserves it. Her crime was against the throne itself." Daniel looked at the girl. She lowered her head, shame and fear in her eyes, but he could see she was too weak even to defend herself with words. His chest burned with anger. "She's not dying tonight," he said. The guard holding the shock staff stepped forward. "You dare to speak against the law of this city? A human? You think your weak body can challenge our iron?" Daniel let go of the chain for just a moment. His hands shook, blood dripping from his fingers. But instead of stepping back, he straightened his back, planting his boots firmly on the ground. "You think chains will stop me?" he asked. "Try me." The soldiers paused, surprised by his tone. Humans were supposed to be fragile, timid, easy to push aside. Yet this one stood as if the cage itself had made him stronger. The alien girl whispered from inside, her voice trembling. "Please stop. They'll kill you." Daniel turned his head toward her, and for a brief second his expression softened. "If I walk away now, then you die in this cage. I'd rather face them than live with that on my conscience." The soldier with the staff swung his weapon toward Daniel. Sparks of blue energy lit the alley, crackling in the air. But Daniel did not step back. He caught the staff mid-swing with his bare hands. The electric charge burst against his skin, burning him, yet he held on. His roar filled the night as he twisted the weapon, ripping it from the soldier's grip and tossing it onto the ground. The other guards froze, shocked at what they had just seen. No human should have been able to take a strike like that and stay standing. "You want me to bow?" Daniel growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Not tonight," the leader narrowed his eyes. "You're a fool. Do you even know who she is? She carries blood that could start wars. By touching her chains, you've already signed your death." Daniel spat blood onto the ground. "Then let war come. At least I'll know I tried to save someone worth saving." The girl's eyes widened. No one had ever spoken of her like that. To most, she was a traitor, a burden, a danger. Yet this human, a stranger, saw her as worth fighting for. The guards drew closer, surrounding him. Their weapons gleamed in the faint light. Daniel stood tall, fists clenched despite the pain in his arms. He was bleeding, burned, exhausted, but the fire in his chest refused to die. One guard raised his blaster, the cold barrel aimed at his head. The alien girl gasped, pressing her hands to the bars. No, but Daniel did not move. His defiance was not just in his body. It was in his eyes, in his voice, in the way he stood like a wall between her and the world. "You'll have to kill me before I let you touch her again," he said. The leader smirked. "That can be arranged." For a moment, silence stretched across the alley. The cold wind howled, rattling the cage. Then, in a sudden motion, Daniel grabbed the loose chain again and pulled with everything left inside him. His roar shook the air. The metal screamed, sparks flew as links began to twist. The guard shouted, rushing forward. The girl screamed his name, though she did not even know she had spoken it aloud. And then, with a crack like thunder, one of the chains snapped. The sound echoed far across the dark streets. The crowd of bystanders gasped, eyes wide with shock. The guards froze for half a heartbeat, staring at the broken iron. Their sneers vanished, replaced with something they had not felt in years. Fear. The human had defied them. The human had broken what none of them thought possible, and the fight was only just beginning. The sound of the chain snapping echoed like a thunderclap across the alley. For a moment, everything froze. The guards, the bystanders, even the cold wind seemed to pause. None of them could believe what they had just witnessed. A human, one single human, had broken a chain forged by alien steel. Daniel staggered, his chest rising and falling heavily. His hands dripped blood. His skin burned raw, but his grip on the broken link remained firm. He looked like a man possessed, driven not by strength alone, but by sheer will. Inside the cage, the alien girl stared with wide, trembling eyes. Hope, Something she had thought lost forever flickered back to life. She whispered softly, "He broke it," as if saying it aloud might make it more real. The guards were the first to recover. Rage replaced their shock. The leader drew his blaster, pointing it straight at Daniel's chest. "Enough," he barked. "You dare defy the Crown's justice? You dare touch her chains?" Daniel's lips curled into a grim smile. "You talk too much." Before the guard could fire, Daniel yanked at the remaining chain with all his strength. The iron screamed, bending under his pull. His muscles strained, his shoulders shook, but he didn't let go. The girl pressed her hands against the bars. "Stop, they'll kill you!" she cried. Daniel didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the stubborn chain. "Then I'll die trying," he growled. The guards lunged at him. One swung a shock rod at his back. The weapon cracked against Daniel's shoulder, jolting his body with burning pain. He roared, staggering, but still he pulled. His vision blurred, stars flashing before his eyes, yet his grip tightened instead of loosening. Another guard struck him across the ribs. He coughed blood, but the chain groaned louder, bending inch by inch. The crowd that had gathered gasped. Some whispered in disbelief. Others began shouting, cheering even, though fear trembled in their voices. "He's doing it!" one voice cried. The leader of the guard snarled. "Kill him!" The blaster fired, a bright bolt of energy streaking across the alley. But Daniel twisted at the last second, and the shot hit the stone wall behind him, exploding in sparks. The girl screamed, her voice breaking through the chaos. Daniel used that cry as fuel. With one last roar that tore from his very soul, he pulled. The chain shattered. The door of the cage swung open with a screech. Frost and shards of broken iron clattered to the ground. The girl's eyes widened in shock. She was free. Daniel stumbled forward, grabbing her arm gently but firmly. His hands were bloody, shaking, but his grip was steady enough to pull her out of the cage. "You're safe now," he whispered. Though his own knees threatened to give out, the guards, furious and humiliated, closed in around them. Their weapons gleamed under the dim light, and their faces twisted with hatred. "Seize them both," the leader roared. Daniel pulled the girl behind him, placing his battered body between her and the soldiers. His chest rose and fell with each ragged breath, but his eyes burned with defiance. "You'll have to go through me first," he said. The guards didn't hesitate. Two of them charged, weapons raised. Daniel met them head-on. He ducked under the swing of a rod, drove his fist into one soldier's chest, and ripped the weapon from his hands. Sparks bit into his burned skin, but he ignored the pain. The other guard swung his blade, grazing Daniel's arm. Blood spilled, but Daniel swung the stolen shock rod, striking him across the helmet with a crack that sent him crashing to the ground. The crowd gasped again, their whispers turning into louder voices. Some shouted for the guards. Others shouted for the human. The alley was alive with chaos. The leader aimed his blaster once more. This time, Daniel knew he couldn't dodge. He braced himself, shielding the girl with his body. But before the shot was fired, a loud horn echoed across the city streets. The sound was deep and heavy, a call that froze even the guards in place. The leader cursed under his breath. "Patrol is coming," he spat. His eyes burned with fury as he looked at Daniel. "This isn't over, human. You've just made yourself a hunted man." With that, the guards pulled back, retreating into the shadows before the patrol could arrive. Daniel sank to his knees, the shock rod slipping from his bloody fingers. His body shook with exhaustion, every muscle screaming. The girl knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his wounds. She looked at him as if he were something unreal, something impossible. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" "You don't even know who I am." Daniel coughed, a weak smile tugging at his lips. "I don't need to know. I just know you didn't deserve to die in that cage." Tears welled in her eyes. Not from the cold this time, but from something else. Something warmer. The patrol horn grew louder. They had little time. Daniel forced himself to his feet, gripping her arm for balance. "We need to move," he said. "If they catch us now, both of us are dead." The girl nodded, fear and hope battling in her chest. Together they disappeared into the dark alleys, leaving behind the shattered chains that told the story of one human's breaking point. And somewhere in the shadows, whispers began to spread. Whispers of a human who broke iron with his bare hands. The night streets of the alien city were alive with whispers. News of the human who had broken chains spread faster than the cold wind. People leaned out of windows, voices low with fear and awe. "He broke the cage. With his bare hands, some said. Others shook their heads. No, it's impossible. Humans are weak. But Daniel did not care about their whispers. His only focus was on the alien girl beside him. Her steps were unsteady, her body frail from days of cold and hunger. He supported her with one arm, leading her into narrow side streets where shadows were thicker. The girl clutched his coat for balance. Her eyes darted nervously at every corner. They won't stop, she whispered. The guards. The throne will send hunters after us. Daniel glanced at her, his jaw set. Let them send whoever they want. I'll keep you safe. The girl stopped for a moment, looking at him with wide eyes. She could not understand him. She had seen cruelty, betrayal, and fear her whole life. But this human, this stranger, spoke with a certainty that made her heart tremble. Behind them, the sound of boots echoed. Patrols. They were closing in. Daniel pulled her into an alley where piles of broken crates and barrels created a wall of shadows. He pressed his back against the wall, keeping her hidden behind him. The sound of armored feet grew louder. Find them, a guard's voice boomed. The girl cannot escape. The human must be punished. The patrol passed just steps away, their torches glowing faintly in the night mist. Daniel's heart pounded, but he did not move, holding his breath until the footsteps faded. When it was safe, he pulled her further into the darkness. We can't stay in the open. Do you know a place they won't search? She hesitated, her lips trembling. There is an old workshop. My father once owned it before they took everything from us. Daniel nodded. Lead the way. They moved quickly through the twisting streets, slipping between buildings, ducking behind carts. The city above them was alive with searchlights. Horns sounded in the distance, and shadows of flying patrol drones scanned the ground below. The girl's strength weakened with each step. Daniel noticed her legs trembling, her body leaning heavier against him. He paused, looking at her. You can't walk much farther. I'm fine, she insisted softly, though her voice cracked. Without another word, Daniel bent down and lifted her into his arms. She gasped, surprised. What are you doing? You're slowing down, he said simply. If we want to survive, I carry you. She looked at him, her face inches from his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. No one had ever carried her before, not like this. She felt warmth even in the cold night, but there was no time for feelings. Behind them, the sound of horns grew louder again. The search was tightening. They turned a corner and froze. 3 guards stood ahead, blocking the path. Their weapons gleamed in the torchlight. Daniel cursed under his breath. He set the girl gently down behind him. Stay low, the guards smirked. There he is. The chain breaker. One of them spat on the ground. Kill him and take the girl. Daniel clenched his fists. His body was battered, his hands bleeding, but he refused to give in. He stepped forward, eyes burning with defiance. The first guard lunged with a blade. Daniel sidestepped and slammed his elbow into the guard's jaw, sending him sprawling. Another swung a rod, crackling with electricity. Daniel caught the strike on his forearm, pain shooting through him. But he used the moment to grab the weapon and wrench it free. The third fired a shot from a blaster, but Daniel ducked behind a cart. The bolt tore through the wood, splinters flying. He rose again, swinging the stolen shock rod into the shooter's chest. Sparks exploded and the guard fell. The last soldier stumbled back, fear flashing in his eyes. He's not human, he muttered before turning and running. Daniel stood tall, chest heaving, the weapon crackling in his grip. The girl stared at him, stunned. He had faced soldiers trained from birth, and he had survived. But his body was reaching its limit. His vision swam, his arms trembled. He could not fight like this much longer. Come on, he said, grabbing her hand. We have to move before more come. They stumbled through another alley until the girl pointed at a tall, broken building with rusted doors. There, she whispered. Daniel pushed the door open, carrying her inside. The workshop smelled of dust and oil, long abandoned. Broken tools lay scattered across benches and cobwebs hung in the corners. He lowered her gently onto a work table and leaned against the wall, finally letting out a deep breath. His arms ached, his burns throbbed, but for now they were safe. The girl looked at him with trembling eyes. You should have left me. You should have run. Why would you fight so hard for me? Daniel looked at her, his face calm despite the blood dripping from his hands. Because someone had to. Her chest tightened at his words. No one had ever risked so much for her. In that broken workshop, surrounded by shadows, she realized something. The human was not just strong. He was unbreakable, and outside the hunt continued. The city's shadows hid them for now, but danger was closing in. The workshop was silent, except for the sound of Daniel's heavy breathing and the faint crackle of the broken shock rod he had tossed aside. Dust floated in the air, glowing faintly in the thin light that slipped through the cracks in the roof. Daniel leaned against the wall, his body trembling. Every muscle screamed, every wound burned, but his eyes stayed sharp. He could not afford to collapse, not yet. The alien girl sat on the work table, her arms wrapped around herself. The cold still clung to her bones, but here, away from the patrols and the biting wind, she could finally breathe. She studied the human with wide, uncertain eyes. He had saved her, yet he was the one bleeding, not her. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked softly, her voice still weak. Daniel tore a strip from his coat and wrapped it around his hand, covering the worst of his wounds. "Because you needed somewhere to rest," he said. "You won't last another night out there." She lowered her gaze, shame flickering across her face. "I don't deserve this. You don't know who I am." Daniel gave her a tired smile. "Doesn't matter. You were in a cage freezing to death. That was enough for me." Her chest tightened at his words. She had been judged all her life for her name, her blood, her past. Yet this stranger looked at her without asking for reasons or titles. For a while, silence stretched between them. The wind outside howled against the broken door, but inside the workshop there was a fragile calm. Daniel checked the windows, making sure no patrol shadows moved across the glass. "Who are you?" he finally asked. "Why would they lock you in a cage like that?" The girl hesitated. Her lips trembled, torn between fear and trust. At last she whispered, "My name is Lyra." Daniel nodded slowly. "Lyra," her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I am, or was, the daughter of Counselor Varian." A high seat in the throne's circle. Daniel froze. He had heard the name before. Varian was powerful, feared across the city. If this girl was his daughter, then her capture wasn't just punishment, it was politics. "They said I betrayed the council," she continued, her voice breaking. "They accuse me of plotting against the throne, lies, all lies. But once the throne speaks, no one questions it. They threw me into that cage to die quietly, without a trial, without a voice." Daniel clenched his fists. The image of her shivering behind frozen bars burned hotter in his chest. "So this was never about justice," he muttered. "It was about silencing you." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with fear. "If they find me alive, they will not stop. They will hunt us both. And if they know a human helped me escape..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "It could start something terrible." Daniel met her gaze without flinching. "Then let them start it. I won't let them break you again." She blinked at him, stunned. Her whole life, power had been used to control, to cage, to silence. Yet here was a man with no power, no rank, no weapon but his bare hands, and he was willing to fight the throne itself for her. A soft sound escaped her lips, half a laugh, half a sob. She covered her face with her hands. "You're mad. Completely mad," Daniel chuckled, though pain laced his voice. "Maybe. But madness is better than cowardice." The moment almost felt warm, almost safe, until the sound of footsteps outside shattered it. Daniel's head snapped toward the door. Shadows moved against the cracks in the wood. Someone was out there. Lyra's eyes widened. "They've found us." Daniel raised a hand, signaling her to stay quiet. He picked up a broken metal pipe from the floor, gripping it like a club. His wounds ached, his vision swam, but he stood ready. The door creaked slow and heavy. A figure stepped inside. But it wasn't a guard. It was an old man, bent with age, his back hunched under the weight of years. He carried a lantern in one hand, his eyes squinting against the dark. "Who's here?" the man rasped, his voice weak but sharp with suspicion. Daniel lowered the pipe slightly, though he didn't relax. "Just two people passing through. We needed shelter." The old man's eyes narrowed as he looked from Daniel to Lyra. Recognition flickered across his wrinkled face. "You," he whispered, staring at the girl. "You're Varian's child." Lyra stiffened, her breath caught in her throat. The old man stepped closer, lowering his lantern. "I knew your father once. He was cruel, ruthless, but you, they said you were gone." Lyra's lips trembled. "They tried to make it so." Daniel stepped between them, his stance protective. "Are you with them?" The old man shook his head. No. The throne destroyed my family long ago. I have no love for them. His gaze softened. If you need a place to hide, you can stay here. For a while at least. Daniel studied him carefully, then nodded. He had no better option. Lyra looked at the old man with cautious hope. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of something she thought lost. Safety. The hidden sanctuary was fragile, temporary, but for this one night, it was theirs. Outside, the hunt continued. But in the shadows of the old workshop, a bond stronger than chains began to grow. The workshop walls shook with the sound of boots outside. Lyra froze, her breath caught in her throat. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hand gripping the broken metal pipe like it was a blade. The old man who had offered them shelter blew out his lantern quickly, plunging the room into near darkness. They're here, the old man whispered, his voice trembling. They've tracked you. Daniel placed himself in front of Lyra, his eyes fixed on the door. His body was battered, wounds throbbing, but he stood like stone. Lyra's fingers dug into the edge of the work table, her heart racing. She knew what was coming, and she feared what it would cost him. The door slammed open. Cold air and torchlight flooded the room as half a dozen armored guards stormed inside. Their leader stepped forward, his eyes blazing with fury. It was the same officer who had aimed his blaster in the alley. You should have run, human, the leader sneered. But instead you broke our chains. Do you know what that means? Daniel didn't flinch. His voice was steady even in the face of death. It means you can't cage her again. The guards laughed, harsh and cruel. You think you've won something? You've only signed both your deaths. One guard shoved the old man aside, knocking him to the ground. Lyra cried out. But Daniel raised a hand, stopping her from rushing forward. His eyes burned as he stepped closer to the soldiers. If you want her, he growled, you'll have to go through me. The leader smirked. Gladly! With a barked command, the guards rushed forward. Daniel moved first. He swung the metal pipe with brutal force, smashing it against the helmet of the nearest soldier. Sparks flew as the guard dropped to the floor. Another lunged at him with a shock rod, but Daniel caught the strike on his arm, ignoring the surge of electricity that tore through his muscles. With a roar, he drove his fist into the guard's throat, sending him crashing into a bench. But there were too many. Two more circled him, blades flashing. Daniel fought with raw strength, parrying with the pipe, dodging swings, countering with heavy blows. His body screamed in protest, but his will refused to bend. Lyra's heart pounded as she watched. Every strike he took, every wound he suffered, she felt deep inside. He wasn't fighting for glory or revenge, he was fighting for her. The leader raised his blaster, aiming at Daniel's back. Lyra's eyes widened. Daniel? She screamed. Daniel spun just as the blaster fired. The bolt seared past his side, grazing him but missing his heart. Pain exploded through his ribs, but he used the momentum to hurl the metal pipe straight at the officer. It struck the blaster, knocking it from his hands. The officer's snarl twisted into rage. Kill him! The remaining guards pressed harder, their strikes raining down on Daniel. He staggered, blood pouring from fresh wounds, his arms heavy as stone. Yet he kept fighting, refusing to let them reach Lyra. One soldier slammed a blade into his shoulder. Daniel roared, twisting and slamming his head into the guard's helmet, dropping him instantly. Another swung low, cutting across Daniel's leg. He fell to one knee but still swung upward, breaking the attacker's jaw with a savage strike. Lyra couldn't stay silent anymore. She rushed to Daniel's side, grabbing a fallen shock rod. Her hands trembled, but she raised it anyway. Stay back! She shouted at the guards. They laughed at her. The council's daughter pretending to fight. You're nothing without your throne, but Lyra's eyes blazed. I'm not nothing. Not anymore. She swung the shock rod with all her strength, striking one guard in the side. The crack of energy made him stumble, giving Daniel the chance to finish him with a final blow. The leader snarled, picking up his blaster again. His finger tightened on the trigger. Daniel pushed Lyra back, placing himself in front of her once more, though his body was broken and bleeding. This ends now, the officer hissed, and then a deafening horn echoed outside. Heavy footsteps shook the ground. More shadows filled the doorway, but these were not the throne's guards. Their armor was different, marked with the crest of Lyra's father's old loyalists. The officer froze. His eyes widened. No. A deep voice thundered from the doorway. Step away from her. The loyalists stormed in, their weapons blazing. The officer cursed, signaling his men to retreat. The surviving guards dragged their fallen comrades and fled into the night. Silence returned, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. He fell to his knees, barely conscious. Lyra caught him, her arms wrapping around his shoulders. "Daniel, stay with me," she cried, her voice breaking. He looked at her with half-closed eyes, blood staining his lips, and managed a faint smile. "Told you, I wouldn't let them take you." Her tears fell freely now. She pressed her forehead to his. "You're a fool," she whispered. "But you're my fool." The Loyalists stepped forward, their leader bowing to Lyra. "My lady, we came as soon as we heard whispers of your escape. The throne will not forgive this, but you are not alone anymore." Lyra looked at Daniel in her arms, his body battered but unbroken. For the first time, she felt the weight of destiny pressing on her shoulders. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about rebellion, and it had begun with a human breaking chains. The night had been endless. Cold winds had carried the sound of chains, of battle, of blood spilled in shadows. But now, as the horizon began to pale, the first light of dawn touched the ruined workshop. Daniel lay against the wall, his body broken but still alive. Lyra knelt beside him, wiping the blood from his brow with trembling hands. Her heart ached to see him like this, burns on his arms, wounds across his chest, his breath shallow. Yet even in pain, his eyes burned with the same fire that had carried him through the night. "You need rest," Lyra whispered. "You can't keep fighting like this." Daniel managed a faint smile. "I'll rest when you're safe." Her throat tightened. This human was unlike anyone she had ever known. He had no duty to her, no reason to risk his life. And yet, he had done what no soldier, no counselor, no supposed ally dared. He had broken her chains. Outside the workshop, the Loyalists of her father gathered. Their leader, a scarred alien with iron-gray skin, stepped forward. "My lady, the throne knows you are alive. They will come with armies. You must decide, hide or rise." Lyra stood slowly, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "I will not hide. I have hidden enough. If they call me traitor for wanting freedom, then I will be a traitor, but I will not be silent." The Loyalists bowed their heads, their eyes shining with renewed hope. For too long they had waited for a symbol, a spark to ignite resistance, and now that spark stood before them. Daniel coughed weakly, drawing her gaze. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice raw. "They'll follow you. They need someone to fight for." Lyra's eyes softened. "And what about you? You've already given me more than I deserve." Daniel shook his head. "You deserved freedom from the moment they caged you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her chest ached at his words. She knelt beside him again, pressing her forehead to his. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry without shame. "You are mad, Daniel. Mad and reckless. But you are the reason I'm alive. I'll never forget that." The dawn grew brighter, spilling golden light into the workshop. It painted the broken tools, the shattered chains lying in the corner, and the faces of the Loyalists who now waited for her command. Lyra rose, her back straight, her eyes fierce. She stepped out of the workshop into the street, where the city still echoed with fear and rumors. A small crowd had gathered, workers, traders, even beggars who had heard whispers of the chain breaker and the council's fallen daughter. They gasped when they saw her. "It's her. The girl from the cage," someone whispered. "She's alive." Lyra lifted her voice, clear and strong. "Yes, I live. They tried to silence me, but they failed. They caged me in the cold. But a stranger's hands shattered those chains. A human they thought weak has shown them what true strength is. And now I ask you, how much longer will you let them rule you with fear?" The crowd stirred. Eyes that had been dull with hopelessness now flickered with something brighter. "The throne will not forgive this," an old woman said. "They will come with soldiers." Lyra nodded. "Then we will meet them not with fear but with courage. They thought I was nothing. They thought a human was nothing. But together we are more than they will ever understand." Her words spread like fire. The people raised their voices, some in cheers, others in defiance. Hope, fragile but real, was rising with the sun. Behind her, Daniel struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on the wall. His body was weak, but his presence was unshakable. The people saw him too, the human who had bled for their freedom. Whispers turned into shouts. "The chain breaker!" they cried. "The human who defied the throne." Daniel gave a small nod, though his vision swam. He wasn't seeking glory, but he knew one thing. Their fight had only begun. Lyra turned back to him, her eyes shining with fierce resolve. "You broke my chains, Daniel. But in truth, you broke more than that. You showed me I don't have to be afraid. Not anymore. Daniel met her gaze, his lips curving into a tired but proud smile. Then let's make sure no one else ever has to live in a cage again. The sun broke fully over the horizon, casting its light across the city. Shadows retreated, and with them, the silence of fear. It was not the end. The throne would strike back harder than ever. Blood would still be spilled. Battles still to come. But for now, in the dawn of freedom, a human and an alien girl stood together unbroken. And that was enough to change everything.